Tonight we will attempt to expand, to enlarge our understanding of two of those mystical powers of the mind. And the first one is understanding. And the second power is will. The reason that we're taking two powers tonight is that these powers are very closely related. They're entwined in their relationship. As a matter of fact, they're called twin or co-faculties of the mind, understanding and will. And also, in the last lesson, the 12th lesson that we do, I want to save that evening to go through all of the powers, to move through them with the understanding that you will have developed at that time and the consciousness that will be yours. Understanding and will. Rudolf Steiner wrote, "For every human being bears within himself, besides what we may call the workaday man, a higher man. Each individual can only himself awaken this higher being within him. As long as this higher being is not awakened, the higher faculty slumbering in every human being and leading to supersensible knowledge will remain concealed. To all who persevere, the day will come when spiritual light will envelop them, and a new world will be revealed to an organ of sight whose existence within them they were hitherto unaware." There is within each of us this imprisoned splendor that the mystics, the saints, the illumined ones, the people who have been dramatically reshaped, reformed, and changed, those men and women who have, in large measure, reshaped the destiny of life for all of us, report to us. And they say to us, "It is not I am not doing this thing. It appears to you that I am. I do not know these things. It is not my wisdom. It is from above. I have chosen it, and it has chosen me. But I am not it. There's more to you than meets the eye. There's a self that slumbers and sleeps, and in this series of lessons, we are in the process of awakening, of calling forth, of recharging these mind elements or powers with a new vitality. And we're choosing them, selecting them, giving them permission to do the things that only they can do in us and through us and for us. Early one morning, a few months ago, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's pretty early. And I stopped at a restaurant and had a cup of coffee. And as I moved to the cash register to pay my check, I dropped the $5 bill, and there was a man seated at the counter beside the cash register, and he immediately got off the stool and reached over and picked up the bill and smiled and looked at me, and he said, "Gee, I like your suit. Wish I had one like that." And then he looked a little longer and looked me straight in the eye. I can see him now, his piercing eyes. And because it was the hour of the morning that it was, he said, "You look like you're either going to have a good day or you just finished having one." I looked him right in the eye and I said, "Both. I just had a great day and I'm just getting started on another one." And I thanked him for handing me the money and wished him a good day, and he quickly said, "No, I'm not going to have a good day." And still looking at each other intently, I knew that what he said was true. He really wasn't going to have a good day. You see, he said it like he knew what he was talking about. He was absolutely clear on the matter, as though he was aware of something, conscious of something that the rest of us in that restaurant could not see. He could look down that long corridor of the day that stretched ahead, and he could predict with an accuracy that his day would not be the way mine was. It was as though he could look right into the invisible world of causes and accurately predict what was going to happen in the visible world of effects. And that's exactly what he was doing. You see, he was looking within the world of his mind and telling me how it was in his mind, and consequently it was going to be that way in his world. And he said it with understanding. He did not doubt it at all. There was a wisdom, and he was absolutely accurate. As far as he went, as far as he knew, he understood. On the way to my car, and many times later, I have prayed that he would change his mind. You see, I've been exactly where he was and worse. Now, he would not believe that I've been where he was. He would not understand that. Nor would he understand that his life could be better, dramatically better, if he changed his mind. I changed my mind, and things got better. I changed my understanding, and my life changed. As a matter of fact, I'm still changing it. And he helped me to change my mind and my understanding a little bit more. Man has been given dominion over his world, and that dominion can only be demonstrated through the awakening and the slumbering of these powers of the mind as they are exemplified by the 12 disciples or apostles of Jesus the Christ, who was telling us how we are, who we are, how we function, and what we must do to have the experiences that he was reporting to us from that place that he was experiencing inside himself. Did you know that the only bad days we have, the only evil or disease existing in our world, is there because of the abuse or the misuse or the non-use of our mind or mental powers? When we call our powers to us or into use, we can give them the power to cast out bad days and to heal every kind of sickness and disease existing in our world. Did you know that? You've been given that power. I'll read to you from the Living Bible. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to cast out evil spirits and to heal every kind of sickness and disease. And the moment that I read this, we see him calling these 12 people and sending them down a road, down some long corridors, to go and fix other people. Right? And that was accurate. But there's another, even more pertinent truth. These 12 powers, these 12 mind powers, when we call them forth, have the power to heal, to cast out evil spirits, and to heal every kind of sickness and disease that exists in us. You can't fix anyone else until you have first done the same thing to you. Can you? Can you give away something that you don't have? Of course not. So first within ourselves we make this demonstration, and these 12 faculties must be called forth. And then that illumined person can go and do outer things, but only to the extent that we have first achieved and accomplished within our own mind or psyche. Here are the names of the 12 disciples. Simon, who also called Peter, Andrew, Peter's brother, James, Zebedee's son, John, James' brother, Philip, who represents the power of the spoken word, Bartholomew, we studied Bartholomew last week, who stands for imagination, and Thomas, understanding, and Matthew, the tax collector, who stands for will, the two disciples that we will work with this evening. And then James, Alphaeus' son, Thaddeus, Simon, a member of the Zealots, a subversive political party. Can you imagine Jesus calling forth a subversive political party member? Can you? Well, when we get to Simon the Zealot, you'll understand it. And Judas, the one who betrayed him. And of course we know that they all betrayed him. Like all of our powers are constantly betraying us because they don't do what they're supposed to do. And they can't until we discipline them. That's what the word disciple means, until we discipline them and then send them forth as apostles. Now Jesus sent them out with these instructions. Don't go to the Gentiles. Why not to the Gentiles? Do you think he had something against the Gentiles? He didn't. The word Gentile means, metaphysically, worldly, externally sense-oriented, willful. And what he was saying is, don't try to fix anybody who is worldly, externally sense-oriented, and willful. If you've tried it lately, you know what he was talking about. Don't go working with the Gentiles. Or the Samaritans. Well, was he disturbed about the Samaritans? Well, the Samaritan stands for that kind of thinking that is mixed up, negative emotions, uncertain, partly worldly and partly religious. The Samaritans were considered to be pretenders. Stay away from the Samaritans. If you want to fix somebody, by all means, avoid the Samaritans. But only go to the people of Israel, the Israelites. Why the Israelites? Because he was a Jew? Of course not. As a matter of fact, he fixed some Samaritans who were Israelites and some Gentiles who were Israelites. It does not necessarily mean the particular religious affiliation. An Israelite meant a spiritually disciplined person. You are an Israelite. Did you know that? You are spiritually disciplined, so much so that you put aside those other nice things that you could be doing because you wanted to grow along spiritual lines. There was something else that you wanted to learn, to know, to achieve, to accomplish, to understand. And so you're here. You're willing to be changed. You're willing to admit that you're not doing so well and that of yourself you can't accomplish or achieve anything in your life. You've tried and you're going to continue to try and you'll never quit trying. You're willing to take charge of your mixed up thoughts and of your negative emotions and to become responsible. That's an Israelite. And he said, go and announce to them that the kingdom of heaven is near, that this fourth dimension is about to be their experience. Tell the Israelites that some remarkable things are about to happen if they will keep on keeping on. And heal the sick, raise the dead, cure the lepers, and cast out demons. If you don't believe in raising the dead in the fullest sense of that phrase, then think of it in terms of bringing life back to the spiritually dead or to the hopeless. Raise them up out of their lifelessness, their joylessness, and give as freely as you have received. And we're here to call forth understanding. The power of understanding, and my dictionary defines understanding as superior power of recognizing the truth, the power of abstract thought, the logical power, the ability to comprehend, the ability to apprehend clearly the character or nature within a thing. There is this higher understanding. Now, understanding is at two levels, and both levels are represented by Thomas, the disciple. And understanding includes all forms of knowing, such as knowledge, wisdom, awareness, that's consciousness, perception, intelligence, abstract thought, logic, and this faculty is located in the front brain just above the eyes. And this area of the brain is generally considered to be the center of the conscious mind. And the other disciple, the twin faculty of understanding, is will. And will is defined as the faculty of conscious and especially of deliberate action. Not just thought, but action. The power to choose one's actions. Will is connected with action. Do you have a feeling for that? Will means purpose or determination, and the fourth definition is discretionary pleasure. And a number of years ago, when I first saw that definition, discretionary pleasure, I saw it in the dictionary, I thought, what does that have to do with will? And then it came to me. Notice how the will in the natural, normal human being gets hooked in with the seeking of pleasure or gratification of the senses. If you don't understand that, think of a teenager, and instantly you will know. Will at the level of the teenager, and we're all teenagers in this sense, only wants to do what it enjoys doing. It can be the worst thing that the teenager can possibly do, but he wants to do it. And what it needs to do, it does not want to do. It needs to water the lawn. But it does not want to water the lawn and will do everything it possibly can to not water the lawn. But it will do everything that it can possibly do to find pleasure, even if that pleasure should be very destructive and self-defeating. Can you see how will gets hooked in with this lower nature? So Thomas and Matthew sit together in the forehead, the gate of the temple, the seat of the conscious mind. Remember that Thomas was the tax collector whose office was just inside the gate, and he took the toll from the pilgrims who came back to Jerusalem. You and I are constantly demonstrating what we understand to be true and will to happen. And you can demonstrate as a visible experience nothing more or nothing less than these two disciple faculties permit. What you understand and what you choose, what you will, is what your demonstration is. It will never be greater than that, and it will never be smaller than that, and it will never be other than that. Will is the executive department of the mind. And will carries out or executes what you understand to be right or good. Now, your understanding might be erroneous, but that does not matter. It is your understanding that is executed. What you understand to be the best course of action for you is what you will experience. And I think that the color coordinates for understanding and will is very interesting. For understanding, it's gold, and for will, it's silver, gold and silver. These are the two faculties that are more closely connected with the outer material, physical world. The gold and silver, or the world where we think our good comes from. The word will means purpose, choice, determination. Whatever you choose, you at that moment will. Did you know that? You see, will is a thing that's so hard to define. It's so hard to get your mind into. When you choose a thing, you are willing it. Choice and will are one action. What you choose to not do, that is a choice. Is that not correct? And you're choosing that to not happen to you. All things can be done by choice. And to make a deliberate choice is the great conscious action of your mind. This part of your mind is the part that makes choices. Now, supposedly those choices are deliberate and wise. But in reality, they are not so deliberate, and more often than not, they're not so wise. If you choose life, the good life, the happy, prosperous life, then you're willing it. But suppose you choose to not like your life. And suppose you choose to recoil from life. Then you are willing yourself into a kind of dyingness or death or fear. The result of not choosing to enjoy your life becomes fear. If you choose health, you're willing health. And your choice is health, and your experience becomes health. Will is a powerful factor in bringing health forth, but you must choose it. All spiritual things must be chosen. And in choosing them, you are willing them. And so it is with anything good that does not yet exist in your life. You must choose it and be willing to have it happen to you. A classic example is that the alcoholic must choose sobriety, and no other person can choose it for them. The impoverished person must choose prosperity and all the things that go with prosperity. The person filled with fear must choose the life that is without fear. With any negative situation or relationship, you must choose to not have it. You see, once a long time ago, perhaps you have forgotten when, you either chose the thing that you do not want, or you let someone else choose it for you. You accepted that as a choice. Now, if you would like for it to fly away, to not be a part of your life, you must choose it away or will it away. You must shoo it away. And I haven't seen this television commercial yet because it's too early in the spring, but you know the little Raid can that comes out and the little button on the top gets pushed and all the little bugs begin to flee and they turn up on their backs and kick their little legs and that's the end of it? Think of it in that way, that you're choosing to not have these things in your life, and so they must flee from you. And they will. Squirt a little Raid on something that you don't want. If the will, Matthew the tax collector, properly understands his job, if he's a good tax collector, then he works with Thomas, understanding. And as the chief executive of the 12 powers, the chairman of the board of directors of your business, your life, he is the executive director. And what the executive director says is done. It's carried out. Now, if Matthew is really in charge, he would inquire into the character and value of every thought that we entertain. Every motive would be examined, every activity analyzed, and every commitment scrutinized. He would carefully check out every thought coming through the temple gate or through the gate of consciousness. But we don't do that. We give ourselves permission to think any old thing or feel any old thing, or we never examine our own motives. We're pretty careful about what the other guy, we've got them pinned down pretty good. But we don't examine our own activities to see whether they're destructive or productive. Matthew, the tax collector, would gain a certain tribute from everything coming through the temple gate, for the whole man, for the spiritual man. You see, Matthew, when illumined, begins to think about the whole person and will not let any activity or any person enter through the gate that does not positively affect the whole person or the destiny of the whole person. In other words, our ultimate good would always take precedence over the pleasure of the moment. Oh, in our earlier stages, will is thinking about the moment. It does not look down the road, only the moment. And almost anyone's life is an example of having fallen short of this goal. Falling short is sinning, you know. We have willed ourselves the most gosh-awful lives and wondered where they came from. Now, many people will for themselves the exact opposite of what they really want and need. They will ill health, painful situations, failure in life, financial limitations, and so forth. I can recall a time in my young life when I willed myself. I almost got an expression like this, trying to feel ill enough so that I would not have to go to work. And you know what? I made it. I was absolutely successful. It happened to me. And I continued. It felt so good to not have to go to work, to face my responsibilities, that in time I didn't even have a job. Wasn't that remarkable? How can this happen to spiritual persons like you and me? How can we be so goofy? Well, until a certain transition is made, a conversion, if you will, on the road to Tarsus. You're all on the road to Tarsus. Did you think that was one person? Saul is the immature will of the juvenile, unformed self of us on the road of life. This will is not controlled by our spiritual nature or the Christ. It's dominated, literally ruled by instincts. It's the Saul. Let's see how that conversion takes place. Thomas, representing two kinds of understanding, both good, but one vastly superior. And the writer of Proverbs wrote, "For the gaining of it, understanding, is better than the gaining of silver, and the profit thereof than fine gold." And the first level of understanding is intellectual understanding. That kind of understanding that looks through your five senses and comes to you through your five senses. It's understanding that you gain from what you see, from what you read, from the first day you went to school and before, from what you learned at your mother's knee and Aunt Sarah, from what you heard from your teachers and parents, and from the kids out behind the school. That's where you really learned a lot, back there. In other words, it's the picture that you acquire from the outside of you, from the material, intellectual world, that input on which you base your actions, as a matter of fact, your whole life. An intellectual understanding is basically materialistic, hence silver and gold. It takes many forms. It can worship money and power, and when it does, its actions are directed toward cultivating influential friends, going to the right church, belonging to the right clubs, reading the Wall Street Journal, studying ways to make more money and increasing your investments. Now, all of these things are good. Do not hear me say they're not good. They are very good. But there is no security in any of them. That's the point. That intellectual understanding tries to build a life and its security on outer things and relationships. But intellectual understanding never knows that its security cannot come from outside. Intellectual understanding can take the form of finding one's identity and security in a beautiful, healthy body. It will then worship the body, exercise it, bathe it in the sun, look at it in the mirror for long moments, smile. And intellectual understanding will from time to time find a small lump or bump somewhere and immediately begin to worry and be upset and run to the doctor and be afraid. And then when the body begins to age, the loss of identity and security are increased, and agony sets in, and the pain and suffering becomes intense. And intellectual understanding has even been known to say in those moments, well, since I'm really going to die, I think I'll kill myself. Because intellectual understanding sees itself as its body. Is that not where its values are and its identity is, its security is there? Suicide is always the result of the wrong use of intellectual understanding. Always. Now, fear and failure that always come from intellectual understanding finally force us to go beyond that level of understanding, the understanding that looks out into the visible world for its peace and place, or into the physical body. And one day we have to turn to the Christ, or that presence of God within us. And fear brings this to pass. In John the 20th chapter, the well-known scripture where Jesus appeared to the disciples through solid walls, and Thomas, understanding, refused to believe it. Remember that story? The disciples were meeting together behind locked doors out of fear. This means they were in meditation. Fear of the Jews drove them inside. And I can tell you that it was fear of the world that first drove me inside and caused me to lock the doors of the senses. Do you think that you and I get down to serious prayer and meditation because we're so sweet and spiritual and good? We get with the spiritual life because our way didn't work. It was good. I'm not saying that your way wasn't good, but it was not good enough. It did not take you as far as you wanted to go. You see, it is not until we discover or until we begin to understand that we cannot manage our own lives and are filled with fear that at long last we're willing to seek the one who can help us. Now, when our faculties are joined together in this way, the Christ appears as through solid walls. The doors are locked. And you have a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. But notice that the first time this experience comes, that Thomas the intellect is the only mind power missing. This is the story in the Bible. And it's also your experience. You see, Thomas, intellectual smart aleckness, is the last one to give up, the last one to show up, and the last one to shut up. He's always got one more little deal that he's going to try. One more little maneuver. If he's an alcoholic, one more little drink. He wants to be sure that he's not getting too sober too fast or too good too quickly. And even after Thomas sees Spirit in action, he questions it. When you began to see your first demonstrations, your first miracles, the intellect trying to explain them away or to take the credit. How many times have you worked with someone who was desperate last week and you and others helped them and the miracle came and you see them next week? And you say, gosh, isn't it great what God did, what Spirit did? And they look at you with that stunned look on their face like, I did that. There really wasn't anything wrong at all. That's Thomas, doubting Thomas. But the Christ is patient, and he says, okay, Thomas, examine this carefully. Examine me slowly and carefully. Make sure. Go ahead and stick your fingers in my side. In time you'll find out. Thomas says, I may not always be right, but I'm never wrong. Emmett Fox, in the Sermon on the Mount, wrote, a tragic mistake that is often made by Orthodox religious people is to assume that the will of God for them is bound to be something very dull and uninviting, if not positively repugnant. The truth is that the will of God for us always means greater freedom, greater self-expression, wider, newer, brighter experiences, better health, greater prosperity, wider opportunity of service to others, and a life more abundant. If you are ill or in poverty or obliged to do work that you dislike, if you're lonely or if you have to mix with people who displease you, you may be certain that you're not expressing the will of God. And as long as you're not expressing His will, it is natural for you to experience inharmony. It is equally true that when you do express His will, harmony will come. It is the will of God that we should all lead healthy, happy lives, full of joyous experiences, that we should develop freely and steadily, day by day and week by week, as our pathways unfold more and more unto the perfect day. And Charles Fillmore in the Revealing Word wrote, God's will is always perfection for all His children. The belief that God wills both good and evil is false. Creation gave us instincts for a purpose, and without them we would not be complete human beings. If men and women did not exert themselves to be secure and made no effort to work and harvest food or construct shelter, there would be no survival. If they didn't reproduce, the race would cease. If there were no social instinct, if people did not find comfort in the presence of one another, there would be no society. And so these basic needs that take the form of desires, desire for the sex relation, desire for material and emotional security and for companionship, are perfectly necessary and right, and they are God-given. And yet these instincts, so necessary for our existence, often far exceed their proper function. And powerfully and blindly and many times subtly, they drive and dominate and insist upon ruling the lives of the majority of the men and women who walk upon the earth. And these instincts achieve the power to control our lives in these destructive ways by controlling the will. The will is the executive power of the mind, and as I said to you, it's the chairman of the board, and what we will comes to pass. And when a person turns his will over to his lower nature, to his unconscious, he will be driven by his selfish desires, by his obsessions, by his fears, by his animosities, in other words, by his weaknesses. And he will be willing his weaknesses into reality and all of the experiences that are the equivalent of his weaknesses. And they will come to pass. At this point, you can see that self-will has run riot. And Saul was like that. Saul was a wild man. He persecuted the Christians who represent our own spiritual nature. Nearly all of the suffering on this earth is the result of self-will dominating our lives. Perhaps all suffering and pain. As a matter of fact, if you take all pain back to its original source, you will find an act of human will. And by that I mean instinctive will. Saul, not Paul. You see, the instincts are intended to preserve and protect the physical man. They know nothing of the spiritual man and could care less, and will actually destroy your spiritual identity. Your instinctive nature will destroy your spiritual nature if you permit it. And this is a classic example of the good becoming the enemy of the better. Our instinctive nature is good, but there's something better. The physical man is necessary but temporal, and the spiritual man is better. Choose ye this day whom you will serve. The correct use of the will is to take charge of the instinctive nature, to begin to will to do what should be done rather than what one likes to do. I will no longer do anything that will bring discomfort to any other person. That's what the mature mind begins to say. Nor will I do anything that will harm myself. I will stand at the temple, at the gate, and I will carefully review all of the things that are happening to me, and those things that are not for my good, I will have no part in that. To grow spiritually, we must learn to practice a completely different system, a system that in the beginning appears to be pure folly. Listen to this. In order to save our lives, we have to be willing to lose them. In order to attain our identity, we must be willing to surrender the identity that we have. In order to find our happiness, we must give up a dependency on the objects that we have sought to make us happy. In order to achieve prosperity and security, no longer can material and visible things of themselves be our goal. All these things are right and good and necessary and God's will for us, but not things in which we are to depend. We are to depend upon a higher nature and to find our identity in that nature. And one new thought stands above all others. We can never find what we want at another person's expense. Never, ever, ever. Will is the main permission giver of our spiritual faculties. And remember this, will moves to action all the other 11 faculties or powers and your whole life. What you choose, you are willing, and it will come to pass. Have you ever been talking to someone and you would say to them, I will see you there, and they say, well, I will try? What's your reaction? Already you're not looking for them. You know they're not going to be there. They have not chosen to be there, and they're merely putting you off in themselves. Have you talked to someone else who will say, I think I can make it? Don't plan to save them a seat. And the biggest cop-out of all I heard just today, someone said, if it's God's will. Oh, ho, 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 ho. How many things we've gotten out of with that one? If it's God's will. Your life will conform and act in the manner which your willingness permits it to. Are you willing to get well? Do you really want to get well? Do you choose to get well? Or would you rather have a rather sickly expression on your face that will get you a lot of strokes? Are you willing to go out and live? I'm talking about really come alive. Then you must choose it. Choose you this day the kind of life, and you are willing it. What you are not willing to have go on in your mind simply will not go on in your mind, and if not in your mind, the invisible world, then it will not go on in your life, the visible world. You only have the activities in your life that you have willed in some former moment, and if you don't like your life or what's in it, then you can change your will. And it won't take an attorney to do it. You don't have to have an attorney to change your will. Did you hear that? One of the most interesting things that ever happened to me was when I was making these original notes, coming back on a plane, and I was seated by a young man who was so busy at work that he never looked up for, it seemed to me, for 2 hours. And I was busy thinking about will and understanding and making notes. And he stopped and looked ahead and turned to me and introduced himself. And he said, "Are you a professor of law at a university?" And I said, "No, I'm not." Now, I was studying will. He picked up on that in a different way. He said, "Well, the reason I asked is that I am a student of law, and I'm here now studying how to draw up a will, how to draw up a corporate will." Isn't that fantastic? I was the only person on that plane studying will. And he was the only law student on that plane studying how to draw up a corporate legal document. Do you think that something is happening in the air around us that we draw to us our own? We had quite a conversation following that. And all my life I've never seen one weak-willed person. Only misdirected or undirected will. You say you have seen a weak-willed person? A disturbed person? Show me a disturbed person and I'll show you the strongest will of all. We don't need less will, we only need more understanding of how to direct it. Understanding first and will follows. Understanding, Thomas is the faculty of understanding, and Thomas means twin. The faculty of understanding awakening, reaching out and touching the Christ. Remember when Thomas touched the Christ, the higher self, saying, "I believe and I will follow you now. I will follow this higher way." I am tired of the suffering that I am causing and experiencing. And I turn my understanding and will over to the care and direction of this inner power. Let's do that now. I surrender all willfulness. And I fully understand that I am a spiritual being. There's a wisdom within me, direction, a sweetness. There's a higher life trying to happen, and I choose its activity in my life. God's will for me is supreme good. God's will for me is health and wealth and happiness. I am willing to do the will of God. God's will is the open door of fulfillment of all my dreams, and I step forward now into this day and the week that follows, willing to know and experience nothing but the best that life has to offer. And so it is.